Hello and welcome to a training on criminal minds, criminogenic needs, and reducing recidivism. My name is Chris Marshall. I will be your host. Get comfortable, strap in, and I look forward to this time with you. We'll be going through an overview of research, risk factors, and interventions in regards to criminal activity and recidivism. A little bit about myself. Once again, my name is Chris, and I live and work in Omaha, Nebraska. I work with an agency called Restore, Rebuild, Reconnect Counseling Center, and it's near Midtown area. We serve a variety of clients. I work with a lot of clients who are on probation or struggling with substance abuse. And we also have an intensive outpatient program here that I help with. I have a master's degree in counseling. I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. And yeah, I look forward to sharing some of my experience and what I've learned working with this population. So yeah, let's dive into the material for today. And I just want to give you a brief overview of the presentation and what you can look to take away from being here today. So this training is slotted for 1 hour. Feel free to take a break, pause the video. Also, it's important for you to grab a pen and piece of paper to have for a couple of activities during our time today. But yeah, I will be sharing what criminogenic needs or risk factors are. And I want this to be applicable to your setting, your learning, where you will be working. And so just be thinking about what needs or risk factors really stand out to you and how you could apply and work with addressing these needs in your setting. So our agenda for today, the outline, will be covering a definition of what criminogenic needs or risk factors are. We'll be identifying the 8 risk factors, and not only identifying them, but some ideas about how to address these needs. And I will be looking at this mainly through a cognitive behavioral perspective. I think it aligns very well with working with this population. And we'll go more into that as we continue on. So why do a training, a class on this criminogenic needs and risk factors? Well, crime has been happening since the beginning of time, and it's not getting any better. It continues. Just our society, the way people are, it's just something that happens. So my hope for this presentation is just a place to be able to share knowledge and experience working with folks involved in the justice system, or who could potentially be involved in the system later on. Also, I would like to offer a perspective and help you understand what a criminal may be thinking about or their perspective, and what it's like to work with someone who is involved with crime. And I recognize that working with this population can present certain challenges, but it is definitely worth it. So sit tight and we'll continue on. So who can benefit from this presentation? I think anyone can really benefit from this presentation, especially those who work with folks involved or who could get involved with the justice system. For example, counselors, probation officers, social workers, students going into these fields, also parents, school workers, and just about anyone who has an interest in learning about this can gain something from this presentation. So, what could you benefit from this presentation? I hope that you come away and learn about what contributes to crime, what research there is to those things, and what things can be done to address or reduce recidivism. And ultimately, what are some things that could impact someone to change their life or to have a changed life? I want you to be thinking about that. So let's define some key concepts that we'll be talking about. One is criminogenic needs or criminogenic risk factors. These are risk factors for crime and recidivism. These are things that have been correlated or associated with someone getting involved with crime. Also, there's a word, desistance, which will come up in this presentation, which basically means to desist or to cease or stop doing something. So we will use this term in the concept of desisting, desistance, desist from committing criminal activity. So during this presentation and as we go through this material, I will be mainly using a cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT model and viewpoint. I think it pairs well when we talk about changing behavior because of how thinking patterns can relate to how someone feels and how they behave. And when you change how someone thinks or how someone behaves, that can impact how they feel or how they think or how they behave. It's like a cycle. A submodel of cognitive behavioral therapy is called reality therapy. Reality therapy talks about the needs that humans have, for example, the need to feel loved or to belong. And when those needs aren't met, that can impact people's behaviors and how they live their lives. And so these two models within CBT or CBT and reality therapy can really apply to this topic and how when these needs aren't met, it can impact someone getting involved with criminal activity or recidivism. Like I said before, I work as a counselor mainly with this population, and I would like to infuse real life scenarios during this presentation and bring in real life experiences working with folks involved in the criminal justice system. Also, I want you to be thinking about how you can apply this in your context, whether you work with clients, you're in an agency, a hospital, in the school, or even as a parent, or thinking about getting into this field or learning about this field. I just want to offer real life examples and how this can apply. So let's dive into the main point, this first main point of what are the 8 criminogenic needs, which we will get into. So these criminogenic needs are risk factors for crime. And like I said before, when they're not met, it can correlate with someone getting involved in crime. And that's why these, through research, have been determined to directly correlate with criminal activity. Now, as we know in our culture, usually how we handle criminals is through punishment and not prevention. And so I think punishment has a place, but as a counselor, I look for prevention and how I can help, and how this person, what they can do or be involved in that could prevent them from getting involved with criminal activity or going back to criminal activity. Now, the statistic here is that 68% of folks coming out of prison return within 3 years and 80% in 9 years. So most people will go back to incarceration, and recidivism is a problem. And I think a lot of people think, is there anything that can be done? And I believe there is. I believe there is hope. And so, yeah, let's dive into identifying what some of these are and see what can be done about it. As I mentioned before, we'll be looking at these 8 needs or risk factors through a CBT model, and just how thinking relates to behaviors, and how changing behaviors, part of that is changing how someone thinks, and not necessarily how we change the other person's thinking, but how they learn to change their own thinking, and how we can support them in that, changing their thinking, and ultimately making healthier decisions for themselves. But it ultimately comes down to what choices they want to make, and how others can support them in their decision making. So as we look at these 8 risk factors, sometimes it can be helpful to identify with a client or a person, is there maybe 1 or 2 or 3 that are the main driving need or needs that is driving the criminal behavior. And so let's think about what can be these needs, and what are these needs. So for our first activity, now I hope you have your paper and writing utensil, but I want you to write down a list of what you think these risk factors are. Maybe some of you have had some experience and knowledge of what they are. Maybe you've had some experience of working with folks involved in crime, or know people, but what risk factors do you think exist for people who commit crimes? So I'll give you some time here, a minute or two, and so yeah, pause the video, take a minute or two to write down, and then we will get into the research behind the needs that the researchers came up with. So take a minute or two, and we'll regroup after that. So here they are, the 8 criminogenic needs or risk factors. We have antisocial cognition, and I will get more into these on the next slides. But antisocial cognition, or how someone thinks, antisocial personality, which attributes to how they behave, antisocial associates, so the people that they surround themselves with, family or marital issues, substance abuse issues, employment issues, education, and leisure. So let's dive into how we can identify these and what these are, and learn more about them. So the first one is antisocial cognition. So this is talking about how this person thinks. And within a CBT model, there are things such as cognitive distortions or distorted thinking, which everyone has an amount of cognitive distortions or can relate with that. But it's when someone has a lot of distorted thinking is where people can run into problems. So justifying can be considered distorted thinking, justifying their behavior or rationalizing their behavior. People having these types of thought patterns can and are linked to criminal activity. The old adage, garbage in, garbage out, is something to be aware of with people, what they surround themselves with, what are they watching, what are they listening to, what are they reading, what are they filling their minds with. This can impact how they think and how they behave. Now, when we talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, part of the therapy is helping restructure how that person thinks or the patterns. Now, we could be working with clients or people who have thought patterns that have been developed and reaffirmed for years. And so this risk factor can be one that can take time to change. And so just to be aware of that. One here is antisocial personality. So this talks about the coping skills that this person has developed. They may tolerate distress. They may tolerate things poorly, emotions or situations in their lives, and may not have learned certain coping skills to deal with certain things in life. They may also have low self-control or be more impulsive. Now, there are certain psychiatric disorders where folks can be more impulsive. Also, how the person was raised in their family of origin can impact how they act and how they see the world. Now, within this antisocial personality also shares that people can have difficulty making healthy decisions, and people who could be more impulsive and not think through their choices or decisions can end up making decisions with certain consequences that may not be very fun or enjoyable. Now, talking about the CBT model, CBT doesn't just address thoughts, but also behaviors as well. And so teaching people how to behave and act differently can be helpful when identifying and working with people in this domain. I think the only thing I would add to the previous slide is just helping people think through their decisions. Some people call that playing the tape through. If I do this, what are the consequences? And this relates to our next risk factor, which are antisocial associates. So who is the person, the client, spending their time with? This can impact their decisions and their behavior. I have a client right now who is on probation and is having to make and is making choices about who he will hang around with, because sometimes people are not safe to hang around with, or if my client were to hang around the certain people, then he would be more likely to engage in criminal activity. So one aspect is being careful with who the person hangs out with, but not just not hanging out with certain people, but who, and teaching the client where can they find pro-social support and having positive influences in their lives. This could look like a lot of different ways for people. This could be a faith or religious community. This could be from support groups, people that they've met at certain groups. It could be even something like a 12-step group or smart recovery group, or even a hobby or a club where the person may meet other people who can be more positive. This can be a big challenge, especially for someone coming out of crime or substance abuse lifestyle. And it's almost like having one foot in one world and another foot in another world. It can be a lonely place. It can be challenging to say no to friends. And so helping clients or people process that and work through making those decisions and choices is part of a counselor's job. And affirming their feelings, validating their feelings, the challenges of finding a new support system, new friends. But yeah, building off of the supports, the positives, if there are any in their lives, and just encouraging that can be helpful in this arena. As we talked about before, people have a need for love and connection, belonging, and support. And this can be a great strength and resource if the client, the person, has these pro-social ties, whether it's in their family, in their marriage. It can be a great support to them. Now, not every family member, a spouse or partner offers a supportive lifestyle or is supportive of their recovery and living a more pro-social life. But when there is those family ties, this can predict them and be helpful in them not going back to criminal behavior. And that's why developing or having this support and connection can be very helpful. But it is also important for you to be aware of when the client doesn't have these supportive ties. I have a client right now who really hurt his relationship with his partner because of his behavior. So there may be marital stress or stress in their relationships because of their criminal behavior. And this can influence their recovery. Now, even before the crime begins, it's important to be aware of certain attachments that the person had as they were growing up, and what are their relationships like, especially growing up, were their parents involved in crime themselves or substance use. This can be a risk factor for that person also be getting involved in crime, and it's important, whether you are working with teens or older folks, just to be aware that family ties can influence criminal behavior. There have been research and studies that even genetic relationship between parents and kids with substance abuse. And so this can be something to be aware of and to discuss with your client. So helping the client work through patterns of thinking and behavior from their childhood can be a place to work with the client. Addressing the current stress of their relationships can be a place to work with clients and helping them develop a plan to get these needs met, the love and connection needs. But even just being aware of the needs and addressing them as early as you can, helping that person develop coping skills to face the different challenges they may have with family and marriage, can help them in the future not return to crime. So substance abuse. So this is a major risk factor for people who are involved in the justice system. So those involved have a 4 times higher chance of using substances. And so we see the direct correlation with those who are involved with crime are more likely to be involved with substance abuse. And it makes sense, right? Because people may need to steal for their habit, or they may be involved with domestic violence because of how the substance makes them feel. They may, drinking and driving. And even in a lot of states, certain substances are illegal. And so there is a direct correlation here with those involved with the justice system are 4 times more likely to be involved with substance abuse. And this can lead someone to being involved in the justice system or incarceration. Using substances alters how people think and how they behave. And so it makes sense that people can get in trouble with the law when they are using substances. And so how can someone address this need? Well, a place to start is seeing where the person is at or meeting them where they are at. And using the stages of change, if you Google stages of change, there are 5 stages that people are in regards to making a change of any behavior, including substance abuse. The first stage is called pre-contemplation, and that is even before someone believes that their behavior needs to be changed. So, as we talked about the antisocial cognition before, people may deny or justify their substance use, and they may not see a need for change. And this is very common. It's where everybody starts. Hey, this substance use isn't a problem, especially if they are continuing to use. They may not see it as a problem, and so they may be in this stage for months, years. They may never leave this stage. So it may take time. The next stage is called contemplation. This is where they are thinking the pros and cons of their behavior and seeing that, hey, it might be an issue. And once they make a decision that, hey, this is a problem, it needs to be changed, they move into the preparation stage where they are preparing to make the change. The next stage is action stage, where they are doing the things necessary to change for at least 3 to 6 months. And the final stage is maintenance, where they've made changes and now they are maintaining that change. A side stage is relapse. Relapse is common. And there's a lot that goes into substance abuse treatment, but this can be a place to start. Is just meeting them and knowing where they are at, and seeing where they are at. Now, when someone is in pre-contemplation and they get in trouble with the law, they may just feel bad about getting in trouble and not so much feeling bad about the behavior that led them to getting in trouble. So once they get out of the trouble or the consequences, they may go right back to the behavior, which a lot of times leads to getting in trouble again. And so it's not really until that person sees that the behavior is the big issue and not the consequences when that person may start to think about changing and needing to change. Now, as a counselor or parent, realizing that it's up to them. I'm sure you don't like people telling you what to do, or, it's not until you make a decision to change um, that change really happens. And people may be encouraged to change because of consequences or for relationships for their kids. And having a support system and positive influences around them can also help with the substance abuse as well. And so we can see that this substance abuse is linked to recidivism. And so treating that and being aware and even just asking during an intake, what does their substance use look like? If they continue in the substance use, like how will that affect them positively or negatively? And when I say positively, like why are they using? Does it make them feel more peaceful, or does it help them be more outgoing or stress reliever? Because they're doing it for a reason. So if they continue using, then they are getting some benefit, but if they continue using too, there are likely to be consequences as well. Or looking at if they were to stop that behavior, the substance use, what would be the positives of that, but then also what would be the challenges or the negatives for them. So looking at it from all different angles, and just realizing that it may take time, but not to give up hope, because people can change. And but yeah, this is a big risk factor for people getting involved with crime in the justice system. So addressing it can be helpful with people changing their life, having a new life, and not being involved in crime. The next risk factor is employment and education. And here we see how employment and education can impact people getting involved with crime. So as we take a look at reality therapy, one of the core needs of all people is one called power. Now, power not necessarily refers to having power over people, but power like the ability to do something, to get something accomplished. And I think that relates here to employment and education. And in our day and age, getting an education and working are essential parts of people's lives. And there have been mixed reviews on having a job and attending school and how that impacts people's criminal activity. For example, one study found that attending school or having a job increased criminal involvement among female probationers or females on probation, but it decreased offending among male probationers. Another study found that offending or criminal activity decreased within individuals after getting married, getting a job, or moving house. And so we see mixed reviews here. So I think it would be important if you had female clients, especially those involved with the justice system, to be aware that potentially employment or school could negatively impact their behavior and thought processes. So something to check into with your clients in regards to these. Now, in my experience, school or work can offer someone something to look forward to, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of purpose. And so I've generally found that having work or attending school can be beneficial for clients. Now, it is also important to be aware that sometimes school can be overwhelming, or are they working too much? And so this can also impact criminal behavior or relapsing. So checking in on their employment or education uh, and how it's impacting their lives can be helpful. And I work with a client who is younger, in his early 20s, and is going to school and trying to find out what he wants to do with his life and where he goes from here. And so potentially offering some career counseling or interventions to help them make decisions about what they would like to do or not do. The pressure from family versus what they would like to do and who they are as a person. So identifying those things can also could be helpful in helping them progress and maybe move forward in a particular direction uh, to accomplishing their goals and finding a good fit for a career. This can all be part of someone's new beginning, or they're living a different lifestyle. Now, later on in this presentation, I will be talking about challenges working with this population, but I will bring it up here that when someone is coming out of jail, and if they have a record, like if they're charged in and get expunged or pardoned or sealed, they may have certain challenges finding jobs. Now, there are resources out there, for example, for helping people maybe getting off an adult protective services registry or getting the charge expunged off of their record, or just finding jobs that are felon friendly or those types of things too. So depending on the client's goal, if they are looking for a job, helping them in this venture could potentially help them from not continuing or going back to prison. All right, this is the last risk factor that we will be covering today. 8 of 8. Now we still have about 20 more minutes in the session here, so if you need to take a break, grab something to drink, feel free to pause the video. But the last one here is leisure and recreation. So what is this person doing for fun or relaxation? This can impact them getting involved with crime. So if we take a look at this from the reality therapy, the core needs, one of the needs is fun. One of the needs is freedom. I think both of those needs can fall under leisure and recreation here. So from some research here, former inmates and probationers who self-report, so fewer recent leisure and recreational activities, are more likely to recidivate than those who report more frequent engagement in these activities. So basically what they are saying are the fewer leisure or recreational activities someone has that is involved with the justice system, the more likely they are to recidivate, to come back to incarceration, to continue in crime. And so we see this correlation with what they do on their leisure time for recreation and how that correlates with criminal activity. You may have heard the old adage, idle times make idle hands. And boredom is a major risk factor in recovery. What is that person using their time for? Like we talked about on the last slide. Maybe they're having a hard time looking for a job, it's challenging, and they have extra time on their hands. So what are they using their free time for? So helping them come up with some ideas of how they can use their free time. Maybe that's by taking a walk, slowing down and smelling the roses. Maybe it's getting involved with an exercise program. Maybe it's getting involved with a hobby like woodworking or crafting or thrifting. So coming up with and talking with your clients about what they're using their free time for is important, because this can, depending on how they're using their free time, can lead to criminal behavior. So continuing on with the ideas of needs and these risk factors, and we had just talked about identifying hobbies and healthy leisure options. You know, one of the reasons why people use substances is to relax. And there are certain things, other behaviors, other hobbies, or other leisure activities that the person can replace with these leisure activities instead of using to relax or to find enjoyment in life. Whether if it's just as simple as sipping on a warm beverage or exercising, you know, to release those feel-good neurotransmitters, the endorphins, to completing hobbies or serving other people, helping other people. And so these 8 criminogenic needs or risk factors relate well with reality therapy's core needs, or Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so addressing the person's basic needs, you know, do they have somewhere to live? Do they have food and clothing? Are they looking for work? Are they being provided for? Is important for people to have their basic needs met. So encourage your clients to check out different resources. They may have to do some legwork to find different resources that can help them with food or applying for disability or finding a job. But there are resources out there that can help people and make connections for people. And this can make a positive difference in their lives and helping them become self-sufficient. Also, not just looking at the resources, but who is in their community. You know, take a look at who they're spending their time with. Help them to evaluate. Are those life-giving relationships? Are they helping or hurting them? And Are they meeting their goals? So we talked about that, addressing their support system, encouraging support and positive people in their lives. And so isolation is also a risk factor for relapse and important in recovery. And so asking them how they feel about their recovery system, their support network, and encouraging those positive relationships. All these things go into helping someone progress, to move in a different direction, to start over, to make a new life, to have a fresh start, new beginning. Okay, there you have it, the 8 criminogenic needs. I have them listed there. So for our next group activity, I would like you to pick 1 or 2 of the needs and write down maybe some ideas or how you can address this in your context, or what would that look like for you to have a discussion about this with a client? What questions would you ask? So yeah, pick 1 or 2 needs, and then we will regroup and give you guys about a minute or 2. But yeah, seriously, take as long as you need. But yeah, we'll regroup in just a little bit here. Okay, we are on the home stretch here, and just got about 10-15 more minutes, and we'll wrap up here. So yeah, which ones did you pick as the top changes, and how you would address them? So this slide will go over some research that predicts the clients or the folks. It predicts desistance. I remember what we said that is for them to quit or to reduce to stop their criminal activity. So what changes predict them not to continue to engage? What were some of the needs that, the criminogenic needs that predicted the greatest chance for desistance? And so we see here reduced substance use, reduced criminal family associations, improved employment and income, and having positive social support. So out of all the needs, research shows us that these are the things that predict desistance, them quitting or cutting back substance use. And I like that aspect, that because some clients aren't necessarily ready to quit substance use. Some are more, you may have heard harm reduction and abstinence, a couple different philosophies about substance abuse treatment. Now, some may be more in line with reducing their substance use, not necessarily quitting it. So this encompasses that even reducing substance use can impact their criminal behavior. And next, the criminal family associations. I mean, that makes sense, right? Who they are closest with, who they're spending their most time with, really impacts their behavior. And so as clients reduce their time with other people involved with crime, this will impact and lessen their chance of continuing in crime. And then also the improved employment and income. So having a job, making money to support yourself and your family, can also predict someone reducing or giving up crime. And so yeah, so these are just some things to focus on with clients. and the reducing the substance use, who they're spending their time with and work. And having these things in place will give the person let's say a running head start in leaving behind criminal activities and behaviors. Now, we recognize that this is a process and can take time, but having a focus like this and working with clients and addressing these things with clients have been shown to have a positive outcome when it comes to crime and reducing criminal activity. Okay, so let's take a look at the 12-month change window here. Not to be confused with the stages of change, but we're going to be taking a look at how clients who are involved with the justice system can change within a 12-month period. So in 2012, there were 4 million people under probation in the United States alone. And during this time period, the expectation for those offenders to succeed is the highest. But also, the recidivism risk is also the highest within this first year. So research has shown us that significant changes in the criminogenic needs can occur within a 12-month period. With more change occurring between the sixth and 12th month period. And like we talked about in the previous slides, that reduction in substance use, reductions in family criminal networks, working and earning income, these things can more likely accelerate recidivism reductions during the first 6 months. What has been found is that during the first 12 months, probationers experience the most change in substance use patterns and affiliation with antisocial family members. And I have seen that in my work, especially working in an intensive outpatient group and with clients involved in the justice system. As clients change their substance use patterns as well as who they're surrounding themselves with, this can really can be a catalyst for significant changes in their lives. And during this first 12 months, it's important for clients to be involved in some type of treatment, including groups, individual sessions, and even support groups and other things that can help the client recover and change their lives. The reason is that being involved in treatment and having support can facilitate some of these changes, such as reduction in substance use and changing their environment and who they hang around with. So as people change these, this can have a direct impact on on their criminal activity. Now, changing thinking patterns can take a long time to change, and maybe someone changes one thinking pattern, but there are other thinking patterns that need to be changed. And so this can be a long process. So it's good to be aware that there may not be significant changes in antisocial cognitions, one of the risk factors, but they can change, but it can take time. And that's why having treatment can facilitate some of these, being around positive influences, reducing or eliminating substance use can all go into how someone changes their mind, changes their feelings, and changes their behaviors. The last thing I want to address before we conclude, before we wrap up, is identifying some challenges, some roadblocks, some hurdles that you may encounter working with clients involved in the justice system. Number one, clients can be difficult. And as people ourselves, we aren't perfect. And so getting along with clients, relating to clients, building that rapport can take work and effort, and humbling yourself or admitting if you're wrong or you said something that maybe offended them. But that therapeutic relationship is important. As we mentioned before, with cognitions, antisocial cognitions, clients may not think they have a problem, or maybe they think that they have it all figured out, or that they don't struggle anymore, and they don't see a need for treatment or support or help. And a lot of times these clients are mandated by probation. They're forced to come, even though they have a choice. The choice is impacted by, if they don't follow through, they may get sanctioned or violated on their probation terms. So sometimes clients aren't happy to be there, they don't want to be there. But a lot of times these clients will ease into treatment. They may start finding some benefit from treatment, learning new things. If you have a group component as a part of your treatment program, they can start to build relationships, see that they're not alone, and they can start to see some benefit and positive things that are coming from being involved in treatment. And that's great. But sometimes clients may be particularly difficult and resistant or argumentative. And sometimes they may even turn on you or discredit what you're doing, or personally attack you. And this is where supervision comes into play, and getting more seasoned counselors and supervisors involved in your care of these individuals, because there may come a time and place where enough is enough, and you need to move on from that client, that they may not be a good fit, they may not be benefiting, and it may be really impacting you. Some ways you can notice this is if you're thinking about that particular client a lot outside of work. They may be keeping you up at night, or messing with anxiety and feeling anxious. And so it may be time to refer them out or discharge them. If they are involved on probation, I would encourage to keep open communication with the probation officer, let them know if they are missing, keep them up to date with if they are participating. And if you're thinking about discharging them, keep them in the loop. Usually I have found that probation officers are very supportive of the work that counselors do, and try to work together. And so, yeah, keep them involved. So those are just some of the challenges and some solutions dealing with those. I'm sure there are more. And if we were having this training in person, I would love to hear your insights and your experiences as well. But these are some of the challenges that I've come across. So as we conclude for today, first off, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to this. I hope you gained something from it. But just to wrap up, some of the things we cover today is identifying those 8 criminogenic needs, right? Those things that may be risk factors for someone getting involved in a life of crime. We talked about how we can address these and identify these in our clients, whether if they're younger or older. We talked about how these risk factors can lead to someone getting involved in crime for the first time or going back to criminal activity after maybe a release from prison or jail. We talked about ways to address these needs, and we talked about some of the, from research, the more, I don't know if I want to say important, but influential needs when it comes to criminal activity, such as reducing substance use, reducing involvement with certain family associations, criminal family associations, having a positive support system, and having a job and making a living. We talked about how working with this population can be tough, but it can also be rewarding. And I think that would be a good place to end our time, is that this can be tough, so you need to take care of yourself, self-care, setting boundaries, referring out if you need to, but also finding that joy and that these folks can change, they can have a better life, they can have families, they can repair relationships, they can start to enjoy life and find out who they are as a person and who they are as a person, who they truly are, and how they can have a positive life. They can move forward and have a fulfilling life, and you can be part of that. And so I wish you the best in your career, wish you best at your place of work and your life, with people in your life that are involved in crime or substance use, and just knowing that there is hope for change. So if you would like to get in touch with me, once again, my name is Chris Marshall. My phone number there, that's my work phone number at R3CC, Restore, Rebuild, Reconnect Counseling Center. And I have my email there. So you can shoot me an email if you have questions or comments. Would love to hear from you. And just to wrap up, these are the references I used for this presentation. Once again, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this training, and I look forward to doing more trainings if I get the opportunity to. But yeah, thank you for your time. I hope you gained something from this, and I wish you the best in your future. Thank you.